Everyone, and welcome to today's simultaneous cabinet meeting for the Babergh and Mid Suffolk cabinets. I'll just quickly run through a few opening comments just to remind everyone that this meeting will be broadcast live to YouTube and will be capable of repeated viewing. The entirety of the meeting will be filmed except for the confidential or exempt items. If you attend the meeting in person, you will be deemed to have consented to being filmed, that the images and sound recordings could be used for webcasting training purposes. The council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. Moving on to the agenda, we have first item, apologies for absence.
Chair, if I may, could I do the opposite and formally welcome Councillor Haddingham to the Cabinet for the first time? Her name doesn't appear on the papers, so if the roll call is taken from the papers, she may be accidentally missed off. So Councillor Haddingham has been an exemplary chair of Council for Mid Suffolk, and with effect from Thursday night's full council meeting, I formally invited her to join the Cabinet, and I'm pleased to say that she's here now as portfolio holder for housing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And I extend my warmest welcome to Councillor Haddingham as well. For Babergh, I know we have apologies from Councillors Holt and Arthey. Are there any other apologies from Mid Suffolk?
Chair, if I may, can I run through a roll call so we're aware of which councillors are here?
Certainly, yes.
Thank you. Okay, so if you can indicate your presence when I call your names, please. We have apologies from Councillor Clive Arthey. Councillor Busby?
Here.
Councillor Davis?
Here.
Councillor Holt, we have apologies. Councillor Malvisi?
Here.
Councillor Osborne?
Here.
Councillor Parker?
Present.
Councillor Ward?
Present.
Councillor Brewster?
Present.
Councillor Byrne?
Present.
Councillor Flatman?
Present.
Councillor Fleming?
Present.
Councillor Gould?
Present.
Councillor Haddingham?
Present.
Councillor Morley?
Present.
Councillor Richardson?
Present.
And Councillor Whitehead?
Present.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The next item, declaration of interests by councillors. Are there any? No. Okay, moving on. And the next item, to receive notification of petitions in accordance with the council's petition scheme. Do we have any petitions?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Next item, questions by councillors that do not relate to the matters items on the agenda. Do we have any other questions by councillors?
None received.
Thank you. Right, moving on to item 5, matters referred by the Overview and Scrutiny or Joint Audit and Standards Committees. We have a paper from the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and I will hand over to the joint chairs to introduce this. Firstly, to Councillor Wellham.
Thank you, Chair. On the 4th of September, Overview and Scrutiny considered a report from the Assistant Director for Environment and Commercial Partnerships. The committee praised officers for their report. The Joint Overview and Scrutiny Committee recommend that the Mid Suffolk Public Realm Service remain in-house, and have also recommended to Babergh Cabinet that the service in that district be brought in-house and the service for the 2 districts be managed by an in-house team and the operational work be carried out by an in-house labour force. This way forward should be the most cost-effective method of operation, give the greatest flexibility. It would allow the range of services to broaden and have scope for local councils taking on some of the work, should they wish to do so. Overview and Scrutiny Committee raised concerns around resources, including staffing, benefits, pensions and vehicles and equipment, Also, in regard to maintaining separate accounts for each of the two districts, so that one of the districts didn't subsidise the other. Officers assured members of the committee that these matters had been fully considered. Mid-Suffolk members of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee praised the in-house service, whilst Babergh District Council members expressed concerns around some aspects of the external contract in their district. Members also considered that communities are more likely to volunteer for litter picks and the like with an in-house service. The committee resolved to recommend to cabinets that option 2 be pursued and that further work be carried out to develop the key performance indicators and contract management. Also that option 4, the local authority trading company, be retained as an option to be considered in the future. These resolutions of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee are set out as recommendations to Cabinet on page 5 of the agenda papers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McCraw.
All I would add to Councillor Wellham's introduction is that we were very fortunate in that we had two contrasting experiences, with option 1 being as we are. So we examined the situation as it currently is in public realm service. Option 2 describes the in-house operation currently being operated by Mid-Suffolk. So the experience of Mid-Suffolk members was invaluable at that point. Option 3 is an outsourced service, as is currently held in Babergh with an external contract. So we had the option to look at options 1, 2 and 3 from direct experience. This was not hypothetical. Option 4 was interesting, but with the time frame involved in a year to set up either a new outsourced contract or to set up a LATCO, the committee felt very strongly that there wasn't sufficient time to do that properly. And the Mid-Suffolk option 2 was probably, not only probably, was definitely the right way to go. I don't think there's anything more can be added to that. The minute itself describes some of the various arguments, but I think you have the thrust of it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Right, members of the cabinets, are there any particular questions you wish to ask either the chairs of Overview and Scrutiny, or do you just want to move on to the main report when we can take into account the points that they have raised in their report? Does anyone have any questions that they wish to ask at this stage? And if that's the case, that nobody wishes to ask any questions, I'll just thank the two joint chairs and the Overview and Scrutiny Committee for the work it's done. They've provided a very thorough report, and I note the comment about the keeping open the option of the LATCO, which we will obviously discuss later. And I know it's something that when we were briefed on this paper, that the two cabinets were open to that suggestion as well. So that's good. So moving on then to item 6, which is the future delivery model for public realm. This paper BCA 1964 for Babergh, and I'd like to, firstly to ask Councillor Malvisi to introduce that before asking Councillor Fleming to introduce the corresponding paper for Mid-Suffolk. So Councillor Malvisi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It gives me great pleasure to present this very in-depth report concerning the delivery of public realm services in Babergh District. Originally presented to Cabinet in June, it was felt that it needed a more in-depth analysis and the establishing of a business case. Just in case people don't appreciate what is involved in public realm services, public realm takes care of the countryside, ground maintenance, litter bins, amenity areas, parks and open spaces, the street scene, highway verges maintenance on behalf of Suffolk County Council, playgrounds, public conveniences, and that means unlocking, locking the loos on a daily basis, so there'd be daily checks. Car parks, and that only involves ground maintenance and cleansing. In June, we considered 4 options: to stay as we are, but we can't really stay as we are because the contract is coming to an end and we would have to go out to tender for a new service contract. So that would sort of put us in limbo for 12 to 18 months. Bring the service delivery in-house alongside Mid-Suffolk. Now, that's an interesting option. It would increase service standards, provide more flexibility, thus enabling us to move forward on our evolving biodiversity action plan. And I think that's for me, that's the very interesting and exciting aspect of it. It would build on the skill sets of Mid-Suffolk. It would build on their experience and their service levels. The third option would be to outsource. Again, that would need tendering. The time involved would be 12 to 18 months. It would be costly. You'd have to put interim alternative arrangements in place. Not the path that I would go down. And the fourth is establish a wholly owned trading company, which is something to be considered once we've bedded in, I believe, with the joint in-house service. Consequently, I'm very pleased and very proud to represent the Assistant Director, Cassandra Clements, and her team, and thank her and her team and the EELGA, that's the East of England Local Government Association, for their robust and in-depth analysis of our public realm service delivery. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Malvisi. I'd now like to pass to Councillor Fleming to introduce paper MCA 1973, the Mid-Suffolk paper.
Yes, thank you very much. And I won't dwell very long because I think Councillor Malvisi has introduced the paper very clearly. I personally am very pleased that we are, I hope, going for the option of bringing all of the public realm work in-house under Babergh and Mid-Suffolk's joint management. I think this will work much better. And I'd just like to, I think now that we have our biodiversity actions coming out, I think it will enable us to deliver these much more efficiently and cohesively moving forward. So I'm looking forward to this new working. I hope that it all goes through smoothly today, and all being well, we should start to transition in November when the current contract that Babergh has with Ivesco runs out at the end of October. I'd just like to add that I would like to thank the Scrutiny and Overview Committee chaired by Councillor Wellham for the excellent work that they did in looking at the options and making recommendations for us. So thank you, Keith, for that. So with that, and my thanks also, of course, to Cassandra Clements and her team for the hard work, and a lot of work it is, that has gone into making this possible. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Councillor Fleming. Now we have the main papers, which on pages 7 to 14, and we also have the confidential papers beyond that, which include the transformation options and the business case. So if you have any questions on the main papers, then please ask them now. But bear in mind, if your questions are the business case, then we will have to move to confidential session. So may I ask any of the members of the Babergh Cabinet if you have any questions at this point? And Mid-Suffolk Cabinet, do any of you have any questions? Councillor Whitehead.
Yes, could we have confirmed or otherwise my understanding that the councils can offer their in-house services to parish councils without the need for a LATCO?
Cassandra?
Good morning, Chair. Yes, on Councillor Whitehead's question, we absolutely can still offer services out to parish councils, and there's still elements of devolution that we'd like to talk about with those town and parish councils that have shown interest previously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, before we go any further into this, I have forgotten one thing, and that is we've had proposals from Babergh and Mid Suffolk. I'm happy to second Councillor Malvisi from the Babergh perspective. May I have a seconder from Mid Suffolk for the Mid Suffolk report, please?
I'm sorry, I am proposing.
I'm happy to second that.
Yes.
Is that Councillor Haddingham?
Yeah.
Yeah. Councillor Haddingham, second. Thank you. Councillor Eburn, you have a question.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much for allowing me to ask a question. And I just would, if I can, add my thanks to, I think it was a really excellent piece of work. And I think it kind of, in a way, shows a good kind of blueprint, let's say, for future types of projects. But my question are, I note in Mid Suffolk's case, there's many volunteers involved, and I note there's volunteer hours, but I wonder if we can calculate at some point how much money this has effectively saved us. And secondly, are there plans to market this service more widely, because I know that many parish councils use different companies for similar services that the new, if this is approved, the new joint combined team could offer. And lastly, if I may, I'm a little bit concerned about the possibility for a trading company in the future, because I wouldn't want the people that work in this service, that on the Mid Suffolk side are really fantastic staff working in that service. I wouldn't want them to be under the cloud of another change soon in the future. Thank you ever so much, Chair, for allowing me to ask the questions.
Thank you. Can anyone pick up on Cass? Can you respond?
I certainly can, yes. Thank you, Councillor Eburn, for your questions. So with the volunteers, absolutely. I think that's really great to be able to show what actually the cost of volunteering is, and there's lots of really good formulas out there to use. So we can certainly show that, and just to say that volunteers is an area that I'd really like to expand across both districts, and there is a really good blueprint, to use your phrase, in both districts that we could work on. Finally, on the marketing services more widely, that's absolutely an aspiration of mine. What I would like to do is get the teams settled in and our service standards across the district up first before we commit to that. But certainly once that's in place, I would like to go out to town and parish councils and some other, potentially schools in the area, to offer our services out to those as well. So the only difference really between the in-house team and the LAPCO is that there's only a certain level of income that you can achieve if you're still in an in-house service, but I don't see us getting anywhere close to that threshold just by helping our town and parish councils. So certainly that is an aspiration of mine to do that when the time is right.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Cass. Councillor Field, do you have a question?
Yes, I did have one around the LATCO, which I think you've just about answered just then. But in paragraph 10, it talks about the quality impact assessment, saying that it's not required at this stage. I was just sort of questioning, isn't once you've made this decision, any equality impacts set in stone, and therefore should that not be done at this time? Question.
Chair, would you like me to answer?
Yes, please, Cass. Yeah.
You're absolutely right, Councillor Field, that an EQIA will be needed. However, one wasn't done at this point, as we were unsure which option Babergh District Council would want to go forward with. As soon as we have an answer on that, we will develop a full EQIA in response to what the new service will look like.
But does that give you the ability still to change anything that should fall foul of the EIA at that time?
Yes, so because we're so close to the start of this, that we really are starting from stage one at that point. So as soon as a decision's made on whatever option we want to go forward, we'll make sure that the service provision is designed in that way. So if we were to go forward with the officer recommendation of option 2, it is entirely flexible, so we can absolutely design that service to meet all the needs of our residents.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fleming, did you want to come back on that?
No, but I just wanted to raise a point, if I may, Chairman. I would just like, maybe for the benefit of everyone, for officers to clarify the makeup and role of the Environment Programme Board, particularly going forward. What role will this board play, and to what extent will members, particularly cabinet members, have involvement with it?
Thank you. Cass, can you answer that?
Sure. So if I give a brief update on what the programme board is, and potentially Arthur Charvonia may want to come in about the council-wide boards. So the Environment Board is one of a number of boards that the council run that look after predominantly programmes and projects, but sometimes other activities of the council. So it's what we'd consider our business as usual work, and it ensures that we are doing everything that we should towards our corporate outputs. It manages the monitoring and evaluation of those projects to make sure that we are spending our budgets wisely in order to achieve our strategies and our corporate outputs. So there are a number of boards in place to make sure we do that, and they have themes. Off the top of my head, I'm sure I'm not going to be able to name them all, but there's a Customer Transformation Board, an Environment Programme Board, a Joint Local Plan Programme Board, a Housing Board, and a People Board, I believe, are all of them. Oh, and a Growth Board, excuse me. So they are all chaired by either Arthur Charvonia or Kathy Nixon. They all have 2 or 3 assistant directors sitting on them, and they also have project support as well as the relevant corporate managers for those areas. So those people look after the range of programmes and projects within those themed areas, along with the assistance of finance and communications.
Thank you, Cass. Right. If there are no further questions on,
I still have a question.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Fleming.
Yes, I just on the programme boards. I'm particularly interested in the Environment Programme Board. I'm a little concerned that this is completely officer-led, and that the cabinet members will not have sight of the forward plan or the agendas or the minutes of any meetings. Are these confidential?
John, perhaps if I can assist on that front and just give some reassurance. So they're not officer-led in the sense that you're absolutely right. Very few of them actually have councillors sitting on them, but they're absolutely not officer-led in the sense that what determines the programme entirely is determined by the 2 cabinets. So really, these are, as Cassandra Clements described, these are the mechanisms behind the scenes by which, as officers, we make sure we're delivering what it is that you've all asked us to deliver. And the linkages are, as you would expect. So for the Environment Board, the linkage would be from Cassandra into each of the cabinet members for environment. And as Cassandra described earlier, each of these programme boards are very deliberately aligned to your 6 strategic priorities, plus an extra 2, one for people, to make sure that we're doing everything that we need to be doing in relation to our staffing, and the other for the joint local plan, because whilst planning isn't one of your 6 strategic priorities, clearly it's very important in terms of delivery of the local plan.
Graham, thank you. I just wonder whether going forward here, because there's so much really new happening, particularly with environment, that's my role, but in general, whether it wouldn't be helpful. It would be helpful for me, speaking for myself, to just have sight of the agenda and to have a little bit more connection with the board. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Okay. Councillor Malvisi.
It's a point of clarification, really, following on from Councillor Fleming. My understanding then of, let's take as an example, the Environment Programme Board, that is what I would refer to as an executive management board, where the executives who are actually executing the instructions from cabinet or portfolio holders get together and report back on where they're at, what they need, what they don't need, how it's running, how it's not running. And therefore, I suppose, if Councillor Fleming agrees with me, that we should, as portfolio holders for always, as the example, environment, that we get a report back every time the programme board meets? Question mark.
Yes, I mean, I'd be, as you described it, is exactly right. So exactly that, in terms of this is where we execute your instructions, so to speak. In terms of reporting back to cabinet members, I wouldn't want to impose a structure on you that said you will all get a report back after every programme board. I think that's a matter for each cabinet member to determine what frequency they would like. But absolutely, the connection is expected to be there between the programme boards and the cabinet members. That is that main linkage. Just to give you some reassurance, whilst the programme boards came into existence around about, I think probably around about March time, that COVID thing got in the way. So the Environment Board has only, I think, met now 3 times. So these are very much a new structure, if you like, that we have in place. The only one that's been running much longer is the Joint Local Programme Board, which has slightly different arrangements. But absolutely, as you described, but I think it's probably a case of each assistant director liaising with their respective cabinet members to what frequency works for you, rather than us saying, here you go, here's a report every month or every time the board's met. But it is exactly that. It's progress against the projects that you have agreed and signed off and agreed the funding for.
Could I possibly suggest then that if we think of things along the chain of command, a chain is made up of links. So if you leave the link open, and that would be not reporting back, then the chain of command is weakened. So maybe if programme boards do report back to their portfolio holders, it would actually strengthen the chain of command.
Absolutely. Absolutely, and the linkage is there already. So just to get, so I'm slightly concerned that this has come up only because this is going off at a tangent. But I'm glad it has come up in terms of it provides us the opportunity to make sure those linkages, as you say, are there. The linkage should be there already, not so much to the board, but to your respective assistant director through your routine meetings in terms of briefings. But we can make sure that programme board activity forms part of that conversation. I suspect it already does without the words programme board being attached to it, if you see what I mean, but we can make that more formal.
I'd like to thank the chair and both cabinets for enabling me to ask that question.
Yeah, that's fine. It was worth having that digression and getting that clarified. But moving back to the actual paper we have in front of us, obviously no further questions, but we will move into debate now. But firstly, can anyone let me know if they wish to talk about the confidential paper, in which case I will move into confidential session. But if not, then we'll debate the main paper. Cass, did you want to say something?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just before we move on, could I just introduce my 2 guests that are here with me today?
Oh, of course. Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. So I have Mark Ems and Colin Taylor here with me today, who are available to answer questions as well. So these are the 2 consultants that have helped us greatly in both the options appraisal earlier in the year and in writing the business case that's before you today. They've been exceptionally helpful. They've worked very closely with our teams, and very much a lot of the thanks go to them for the detail that's in this report. So they're available for everybody to ask questions to as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Right. So I think we've got 2 separate recommendations, one for Mid Suffolk, one for Babergh, which are different and probably need to be discussed differently. Does anyone from Babergh wish to comment on what we have to do, which is effectively choose one of these options. Obviously, you'll have heard from Overview and Scrutiny that they recommend bringing in-house, and indeed we have discussed this, I know, in the briefing and come to a similar conclusion. Does anyone from Babergh wish to comment on that option at this stage? And for Mid Suffolk, it's to continue with the in-house service. So again, does anyone from Mid Suffolk wish to comment on that? Does anyone have any questions they would like to ask on the confident? Councillor Busby.
Good morning. I just have a couple of concerns. One is that we're setting up like an organisation, if you like, which will be in competition with Suffolk County Council's Veritas. I'm just wondering whether that's perceived to be a good thing or not. Bearing in mind we're supposed to be working a lot closer with all of the councils. And then the second thing is that when we looked at bringing in building services into in-house, the costings were woefully inadequate in terms of we underestimated a lot of the costs. How sure are we that we've got the costings right this time?
Thank you. Cass, do you want to pick that up or?
Sure. Thank you, Councillor Busby. So if the Cabinet decide to go ahead with the LATCO option, then you're absolutely correct in that it would be in direct competition to someone like Veritas and Suffolk County Council. So that is one of the cons, I guess, of that option, which is detailed in the paper. There's pros and cons set out for all of the options in there. And one of the reasons that it's not the officer recommendation is that it is a very hard sector to get into, especially when you are so small. So the likes of Veritas, the likes of Veolia, Landscape Management Company, ID Verdi are all very large companies, and so the ability to infiltrate those kind of contracts, certainly at that size, is quite difficult, which is why at this point that wasn't the officer recommendation, though I'd certainly take into account Overview and Scrutiny's recommendation to keep it open for the future. In terms of building services, this has been spoken about a lot, both Overview and Scrutiny and unofficially or informally, excuse me, as well. And actually, we see that as a really good lesson to have learned from that. So everything that happened with building services, we've got the advantage of learning from. Mark and Colin, who are with me today, have had full and open discussions with our finance team. We've had really good information back from ID Verdi about their costs. And so we are confident that the figures that we have included are correct. However, I'm very happy to hand over to either Mark or Colin to give a bit more detailed answer about what we've covered in those finances. I believe Colin will come in on that point.
Colin.
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, just to offer some reassurance around that costing side, we, as Cassandra said, we work very, very closely with the finance team, and I have to say, in my experience, probably one of the best experiences I've had of working with a finance team. Very, very cooperative, very open, very supportive. So that was really helpful. Mark's experience from the commercial sector has enabled him to engage really productively with ID Verdi. He speaks their language, and we got really good information from them as far as possible. And I think overall, as consultants, what we've done with this scenario is be extremely cautious. We were aware of your history, particularly with the building services, and as Cass said, that's a learning experience for everyone, including us. And we've seen plenty of these in other authorities that we've worked within. So we took a very cautious, very prudent approach. And if you look at, particular areas of sensitivity, like the impact of bringing staff in from a commercial contractor onto local government pension scheme and onto standard council terms and conditions, we've tried to be as comprehensive as possible about modelling the impact of that going forward. I think in conclusion, as consultants, the worst thing we can do is paint a sort of overly rosy picture for you that leads you to make an ill-informed decision. So we would actually, as consultants, rather present a very prudent and cautious set of numbers that say, in essence, this is the worst case scenario. And actually, I think within the model, there's probably some going forward in terms of productivity and sweating your assets and getting more bang for your buck. I think there's actually some potential in there for you.
Okay, sorry, may I come back in, John? Did at any point we have discussions with Veritas about working jointly?
No, we haven't had a discussion with any external contractor about working jointly.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Colin. Councillor Brewster.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, from a Mid-Suffolk angle, I have to say that I'm really, really pleased that we are looking at the in-house model, because from the Mid-Suffolk angle, most of us know exactly how that has worked for us, and a phone call gets very rapid response, I have to say, and that's been the same right the way since I've been on council, and I think it probably can't be superseded. We have a really good team there at the moment, and I suspect that as we get the enlarged team, that things will move forward to an even greater level, and that's to be very much welcomed. On the LATCO front, yeah, I know the amount of business that is around that's doing this work. It is probably a difficult one to get into, to get the really big jobs, I suspect. But that's not saying that I don't think it's a good idea. I just think that we need, when we look at it, to be quite cautious in our approach on it. And that is, I think, really all I want to say there. But I do welcome this move.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, this is more of a request than a question, I guess, but without going to any great expense, I'd like to see the new combined service having our branding clearly visible, so the residents of both districts can see the councils working together, providing these great services from their council tax.
Yeah, I'd echo that. Yeah, thank you. I've got a question, actually. Obviously, I think from the Babergh Cabinet's perspective, I know how my colleagues feel at bringing in-house and working to provide a joint in-house service across both districts is the way that we would prefer to go. And I don't want to go into the specific details to avoid going into confidential session, but looking at the acquisition of the capital spend and acquisition of fleet assets, just some clarification. The pages in further down the agenda pack talk about some assets being shared between the two districts, but there's some others that have been bought specifically by Babergh. Does that mean that there are certain vehicles which will operate only in one district or another, or is it the intention that all vehicles will be shared across both districts?
So it's most likely that there will be some vehicles that do work only in one district, simply because they will be based on route. So they'll be allocated to a route, and the route would be allocated to members of staff. So it's much more likely that those kind of vehicles would end up staying. What we are going to look at is making sure that we don't create an invisible boundary that makes us less effective on the district boundaries. Yeah. So there can be some routes that will go across district, and therefore the vehicle may technically technically belong to Babergh and work in Mid Suffolk, or vice versa. And then, as the report says, there will be some other assets, probably the more expensive ones. So we don't end up buying one for each council and it's sitting there for hours a day. We'll look at combining those so we can have shifts on those, so they can be used across both districts. Whilst that does bring the lifespan of that vehicle down a little, it's much more effective than buying two vehicles, one for each council. So that's the very large vehicles, like your large sweepers and hot washes and things like that.
Thanks, Cass. And that brings me on to my next question, which is the sweeper, which is going to need replacing because it's coming to the end of life. You're probably aware that there have been some questions over clearance of country lanes where the soil and vegetation is built up in the middle, and the current sweeper can't deal with that. Is that something we can look at in terms of a replacement vehicle being able to do that? Because neither we nor the county council seem to be able to deal with these roads, and apart from being a hazard to cyclists, unless you have an SUV, your car will get grounded on this.
Absolutely. So when we look to replace a sweeper, it will certainly be of a better model and grade, without doubt. What we will have to do is, because I'm not sure any sweeper can deal with the state that some of the roads are in currently, what we might have to do is look at a schedule of work that goes alongside for some of the worst affected areas, because they may need some hand clearance or some other mechanical clearance first to get on top of them. But a new sweeper absolutely would be able to keep on top of those areas much better.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Morley.
I've got a question for when we move into a private session. Thank you, Chair.
Right. Okay. It's probably a good point that we do that, or vote to do that now. We will obviously have to come back to public session for the final vote on the recommendations, but I think probably at this stage we will move into private session. So therefore, for item 7 on the agenda, we need to consider whether, pursuant to Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, the public should be excluded from the meeting for the business specified below, on the grounds that if the public were present during this item, it is likely that there would be disclosure to them of exempt information as indicated against the item. The author of the report proposed to be considered in Part 2 of the agenda is satisfied that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing information. So can we take a vote on whether to move into confidential session to discuss the Part 2 papers? I'm proposing that. May I have a seconder?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Councillor Marvisi. Right. Unless then, rather than go through a roll call vote, unless anyone has any reason why we shouldn't, then I propose we move into the confidential session to discuss the Part 2 papers. Okay, can we switch off the Thank you, and welcome back to the public session of this simultaneous cabinet meeting. Right, we're now going to move into voting on the recommendations. Now, the first recommendation for Babergh is that the cabinet takes a decision. I think we have come to that decision, and that is option 2, to bring the service in-house. Do we also wish to add the recommendation from overview and scrutiny that we can in the future, or at least keep the option open of a trading company, which is option 4?
Yes.
That's what I thought, the way that we were going here. So for Babergh then, I think we can move to a vote on that recommendation then. Claire?
Thank you, Chair. So when I call your names, if you can say for, against or abstain. Councillor Busby?
For.
Councillor Davis? Councillor Davis?
He is there.
Okay, I'll come back to him in a moment. Yeah. Councillor Malvisi?
For.
Councillor Osborne?
For.
Councillor Parker?
For.
Councillor Ward?
For.
Councillor Davis?
For.
Thank you. It's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. Right, for Mid Suffolk then, the recommendation is that you wish to continue with the current in-house service. And do you also wish to, as overview and scrutiny has recommended, keep open the option of option 4, the trading company? Councillor Whitehead.
Strictly speaking, that option is open anyway, whether we consider it or not.
That's probably true. Yes. Yeah. Okay then, Claire, can you take the Mid Suffolk vote, please?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Brewster?
For.
Councillor Byrne?
For.
Councillor Flatman?
For.
Councillor Fleming?
For.
Councillor Gould?
For.
Councillor Haddingham?
For.
Councillor Morley?
For.
Councillor Richardson?
For.
Councillor Whitehead?
For.
Thank you, Chair. That's unanimous.
Thank you. Well, thanks very much, everyone, and thanks to Colin and Mark for joining us and helping out with the questions. That concludes today's simultaneous cabinet meeting. The next meeting is on the 5th of October at 2:30. Thank you very much, everyone.